On this edition, I'm going to break down and predict the upcoming fight between Benson Henderson and Nate Diaz. Now, obviously, Benson Henderson retained his title against Frankie Edgar at UFC 150. That happened a couple days ago. And Nate Diaz is the next top contender. Obviously, there's been no card announced for these two, but this is obviously the next fight that will be happening for the Lightweight Championship in the UFC. So what I'm going to do in this video, I'm just going to break down both fighters. I'm going to do my predictions. So I'll start with Benson Henderson. Now, Benson Henderson's skill set, in the stamp department, he does boxing, does Muay Thai. He's a black belt in Taekwondo. And he has a good stand-up set. I'd say he's a better wrestler than he is in stand-up. His stand-up continues to come a long way, given the fact that he continues to dabble in multiple stand-up styles. Now, he's a big guy for the division. Benson Henderson has a 70-inch reach. He has a huge reach disadvantage in this fight. But what he does have in this fight is he's more explosive. He's the faster striker in this fight. He's much more dynamic. He has a lot more weapons in his arsenal than Nate Diaz does. He incorporates leg kicks. We saw them at UFC 150. We've seen him countless times. He's got really strong leg kicks. I mean, he absolutely beat Frankie Edgar's lead leg down to a pulp. Made his movement almost limited it in the best way to put that. And his leg kicks, they could go on multiple levels. He can beat up the body, beat up the legs, beat up the head. He has good hand speed. He throws elbows. He's been known to throw flying knees. He's very dynamic. You never know what's coming from Benson Henderson. He could go both on the offensive. He could also sit back and counter strike. He's shown that both in multiple fights. Got good stand-up. I think the reach is a disadvantage in this fight, but his explosiveness, his good footwork, his ability to pop forward in the pocket, I think it's almost it's a good advantage for him. He's definitely the more athletic fighter in this fight. Also, he's got cardio for days. He's got an outstanding chin. Benson Henderson is not an easy guy to finish. We saw him take the leg kick off the cage from Anthony Pettis. That did not finish him. He was able to finish that fight. There's no quit in Benson Henderson. He fights with an incredible amount of heart. Regards to his ground game, he's an outstanding wrestler. He fights well in the clinch. He could strike in the clinch and dirty box. He could trip out of the clinch. He's got a good single and double leg takedown. His athleticism allows him to be very explosive with his takedowns. And once he gets you down on the ground, Benson Henderson, I think his bread and butter personally is his wrestling and his ability to posture up and rain down ground and pound. We saw what he did to Jim Miller, a guy who's got a really good wrestling background, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background. He beat up Jim Miller to a pulp. Absolutely postured up and really just had his way with Jim Miller. Obviously, Jim Miller's tough, could not finish Jim Miller, but I mean, most guys would not be able to take that beating. Benson Henderson's got some serious power in the ground and pound and stamp department. He could definitely beat people down. He has good ground control. He could advance guard, and he also has a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He could submit guys. His guillotine choke is one of the best. I mean, very few people can survive the guillotine choke of Benson Henderson. See him do it to countless people. He could also submit in his guard in the dominant position. I think more the dominant position is probably his better way of submitting fighters. I mean, he does have a good guard. It's not better than Nate Diaz's. Also is that his submission defense is outstanding. Benson Henderson's made of elastic. He has been submitted before. That was early on in his career. But I mean, since then, I mean, we saw the submissions that Jim Miller had on him. We saw Frankie Edgar lock a couple, and Benson Henderson's practically impossible to finish. The guy's made of elastic. Even when you think it's locked in tight, it's not. He's going to fight his way out. He's going to weather the storm. He's going to get out of that submission. He's going to make your arms go, get completely gassed, and he's going to beat you down. Very, very tough guy to submit. But if anybody can submit him in this division, I personally think it's Nate Diaz. Now, where I think Benson Henderson is successful in this fight, I think if Benson Henderson keeps staying, he could very well do that. I mean, I think he'd have to almost utilize his leg kicks and not get caught in the barrage and volume striking boxing that Nate Diaz implements. I think if he's going to fight a good game plan, I think he's got to utilize his wrestling. The biggest hole, or the only hole in Nate Diaz's game, is his wrestling. Now, you're going to have to avoid the submission attempts from the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but you can utilize your wrestling, get the takedowns, work in your ground and pound, attempt submissions if you can be successful with those. But I don't see Benson Henderson winning this fight via knockout or TKO. I don't see him submitting Nate Diaz. I think if he's to win this fight, it's by decision. It'd be either a close decision or he could walk away with this one unanimously if he could implement the proper wrestling technique. So that's what I have in regards to Benson Henderson. So Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz is the top contender in the lightweight division. And since coming down from welterweight, obviously getting absolutely dismantled and destroyed by Rory McDonald, Nate Diaz has hit his stride. Now, Nate's skill set, what he brings to the table, his boxing, I mean, training with Andre Ward. And another name that really doesn't get recognized enough is Richard Perez. Richard Perez is such an underrated boxing coach. What he's done for the Diaz brothers, the style of boxing that they bring, the volume striking, the relentless pace, I mean, he's done outstanding things with them. And Nate Diaz continues to get better every time. Every time he comes out, his boxing is more crisp, and it's just the technique continues to get better and better. His 1-2 is absolutely pristine. I mean, it always lands. It's got a quick snap. He doesn't have the quicker speed or hand speed or striking in this fight, but he's very accurate. He's very good at finding the gaps and his good technique in his stand-up, and it's the pace that he pushes. He's relentless. He has outstanding cardio. You never see Nate Diaz winded in a fight. He's constantly in your face. His chin allows him to push forward because he can take the hits, and he's not going to give you time to rest or any chance to rest in the fight. And he pushes forward, and the thing is, he has a good 1-2. He utilizes jab, a very accurate striker, and throws punches in bunches. Now, it's the combinations you expect, like a 3-strike combination. Nate throws combinations at 4s and 5s. He absolutely picks people apart, and it's almost like bee stings. He doesn't have that one-punch knockout power, but the strikes add up when you fight and stand up with a fighter like Nate Diaz. He's going to beat you down, and he implements the body perfectly. The body shot is one of the most underrated strikes in mixed martial arts, and Nate Diaz implements it to a T. Body to the face, separates, and he's been working his clinch very effectively as well. Nate showed that in the Jim Miller fight, throwing knees at both the face and the legs to get rid of the mobility and movement of the fighters. We saw it very well. And his takedown defense is coming a long way. It's still not outstanding. It's not the best of takedown defenses, but he showed us some signs of life in his takedown defense against Jim Miller. Now, if he is to get down to the ground, though, I mean, he works in that power guillotine very well when he gets taken down. We saw it against Jim Miller. He locked it in perfectly on the takedown attempt and submitted Jim Miller. I think that could be a way he could finish. Benson Henderson could try and lock it in. When he fights off of his back, Nate Diaz is no joke on the ground, and he is probably one of the best guards of fighting off of his back. He locks in that triangle choke. He's relentless with his takedown, not his takedown, with his submission attempts off his back. He's got outstanding guard. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He recently got awarded the black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under the great Cesar Gracie, and he's got, honestly, in the division, no better fighter fighting off his back and submitting fighters than Nate Diaz. So probably one of the best in mixed martial arts. He's got an outstanding guard, very tricky, and he's constantly working. He's constantly rolling. The question is, can he keep the fight standing, or can he submit a guy like Benson Henderson if he is to be taken down if Benson's uses wrestling? A couple things about Nate Diaz. He has a huge reach advantage in this fight. It's a 6-inch reach advantage. He has 76 to Benson 70. He's not the fastest striker in this fight, but I think he is the better striker in this fight, given that his boxing is more polished and refined, even against a dynamic striker like Benson Henderson. I think his boxing weighs better than a dynamic striker like Benson Henderson. But the hole in his game is the wrestling. Can his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu match Benson Henderson's wrestling? That's the biggest question. Obviously, Nate's got a great chin. He's got outstanding cardio. He's a very tough guy to get in a dogfight with. Nate's been in dogfights before, and we'll see if this wants to turn into a dogfight. So where I see Nate being successful, I think keep it standing most definitely. I think he could definitely get the better of the exchanges, utilizing and fighting his reach effectively, throwing volume, chopping down Benson Henderson. Benson Henderson's a very hard guy to beat up. I mean, he hardly shows signs of fatigue, or he's never technically been cut. You never see the guy take a beating. After a 5-round fight, it looks like he's never been into anything. I think the 5 rounds is an advantage for Nate, given his cardio. Obviously, Benson's got good cardio too. But I think if Nate can keep it standing, he'll be successful. I think he will be put down on the ground. I mean, he's got to try and work that power guillotine and transition from going from stand-up down to the ground, or he's got to be relentless with his submission attempts off his back. So that's where, I mean, I don't see Nate TKOing or knocking out Benson. I can see him submitting him in the power guillotine on the takedown, or winning a very close decision against Benson Henderson. So where my prediction lies in this fight, and there's no doubt, Benson Henderson's an outstanding fighter, most definitely one of the better champions in the lightweight division. Guy brings a whole different dynamic. He's a big fighter. He does have a reach disadvantage in this fight. He's got incredible heart, incredible toughness. But I think we're going to see a little bit of everything in this fight. It's going to be a very back-and-forth fight. It's going to be a close fight. I think we're going to see a lot of stand-up. We're going to see some brawling. We're going to see some technical striking. We're going to see Benson dump Nate down to the ground. We're going to see submission attempts. We're going to see ground and pound. It's going to be a little bit of everything. But when the dust clears and settles, I'm going to have to go with Nate Diaz in this fight. I mean, I think, Benson's been in a lot of wars, so is Nate, but I think when it comes down, I think Nate's going to keep the state. He's going to work the striking. He is going to be put down to the ground. I could see him potentially. It's going to be either a close decision, maybe a split decision, maybe a close unanimous decision, or I could see Nate locking in a power guillotine from the transition from the takedown down to the ground. So I'm going to have to take Nate Diaz dethroning the lightweight champion in Benson Henderson and defeating Benson Henderson via unanimous split decision or a power guillotine choke, and becoming the new lightweight champion in the UFC.